Hello there, you're watching the Press Preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with Aubrey Allegretti, Chief Political Correspondent of The Times, and Annabel Denham, Deputy Comment Editor at The Telegraph. Welcome to both of you. So to the front pages straight away. Let us kick off then with the Mirror. Shame on you. The Mirror leads with Keir Starmer's criticism of Rishi Sunak's controversial remarks about transgender issues in the House of Commons today. Prince Harry flying back to the US while Prince William returns to his royal duties after the King's cancer diagnosis is the lead story for The Metro. The headline, Duty Calls. Top Son is how The Sun describes William's efforts to stand in for his father. While the Mail carries William's message to the people, thank you so much for all your kindness. The Guardian claims an exclusive with a report that Tory peer Baroness Mone told the government that she would not benefit personally from the deal later struck to supply over £200 million worth of PPE equipment during the COVID pandemic. The Office for Budget Responsibility has told the PM he must slash the benefits bill and get more people working rather than rely on immigration to reduce the country's debts. That's the Telegraph's lead. The Express suggests that Rishi Sunak may be considering a political comeback for Boris Johnson. The Eye has news of a medical study which suggests that taking erectile dysfunction drugs such as Viagra may reduce the risk of men developing Alzheimer's. Financial Times leading with the takeover of house builder Redrow by rivals Barratt and a deal worth £2.5 billion. And with another major storm about to hit the UK, the Star calls it the return of the beast from the east and predicts many Brits will head to Spain to avoid it or enjoy the snow. Or not enjoy the snow. Anyway, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers for yourself while you watch our guests. So let's head to them, to Aubrey and to Annabel. Welcome to both of you. Aubrey, kick us off then. Daily Mirror, shame on you.
Yes, and this carries a photo on the front of Rishi Sunak at Prime Minister's Question Time today, along with Brianna Joy and both her parents. Now, we've heard a lot about this today, but effectively, Brianna's mother was in Parliament today to meet several politicians, including Keir Starmer. And Keir Starmer opened the PMQ session by sort of paying tribute to her and saying it's wonderful to have her here. Then he went on to criticise Rishi Sunak about the NHS. And the Prime Minister retorted, saying, you know, you can't accuse me of having broken promises when you have yourself broken several pledges when you were trying to become Labour leader, and then listed them out. And then the sort of final one was equivocating on what or what wasn't a woman or what would define one. And that was judged by some to be in very poor taste, given that Brianna Joy's mother was in Parliament that day. It's sort of now exploded into this bigger row where you have Conservative MPs who think that it was sort of very distasteful, and Brianna's father, who has called on the Prime Minister to apologise and said it's deeply offensive.
Yes, yeah, here on Sky News, exactly. And called to apologise, the PM was during Prime Minister's questions as well. And then afterwards, during the briefing, which I don't know if you were in it or not, but your colleagues would have been if you weren't, also refusing to apologise. Kemi Badenoch then came out and said that it was wrong of Sir Keir Starmer to relate this case to transgender issues as well. So, you know, where do you see this story going? Was it distasteful, and what should the Prime Minister now do about it?
Undoubtedly, it was a distasteful remark. I think part of the issue is that PMQs is not a natural arena for Keir Starmer or for Rishi Sunak. Neither of them lend themselves well to improvising. Rishi Sunak will have come in, perhaps unaware that Brianna's mother would have been in the gallery that day. He would have had his practiced, written out lines and went through with them, perhaps without fully thinking through the consequences. That said, to me, it appeared quite opportunistic for Keir Starmer to then respond, seemingly trying to score political points, which is what Kemi Badenoch, the Equalities Minister, said later this afternoon, perhaps being seen to slightly exploit the pain that Brianna's mother is in order to get one up over the Prime Minister. So what we now have is a situation where undoubtedly many members of the British public are giving an almighty groan, but Keir Starmer, Labour Party, are demanding that Rishi Sunak apologise. The Tories, some Tories, are demanding that Keir Starmer apologise. And what I really hope is that Peter Spooner's intervention, where he has clearly taken Labour's side, you know, insisted that the Prime Minister ought to apologise, I expect that could be the end of it.
Yes, not surprising that it is the left-leaning papers, The Mirror and now The Guardian as well, that have this on the front page. Brianna Ghey's father there condemns Sunak's dehumanising trans jibe. I suppose the problem is PMQs is there to shoehorn in your hits, your attack lines on each party. And for the Conservatives, it is that you have no plan, that you flip-flop and you're indecisive over your policies, which we'll come to in a minute. And, you know, you try and land it at every opportunity. Is that part of the problem here, do you think?
Absolutely, and no more so in an election year. I mean, this is most people's sort of very small, narrow window into which they view, interact and experience politics in the week. They have far better things to be doing with their time than following every coffin spit like someone like me. So Prime Minister's Questions is the sort of 30 minutes where they really get to see what the politicians' arguments are. The problem is if you have sort of too many prepared lines, if you're not sort of fast enough on your feet to be able to adapt to what is being criticised of you, then you can sort of look too rehearsed, and I suspect that that's probably what happened here. I think people close to Rishi Sunak suggest he probably didn't hear Keir Starmer say that Brianna Ghey's mother was in the gallery, but in the sort of session afterwards, the huddle with Downing Street, they again were sort of defending the line that he used. They were saying it was perfectly legitimate to highlight criticisms of Sir Keir Starmer without then getting drawn into what a woman was or wasn't and the appropriateness of that. This is really, I think, probably going to be the start of quite a bitter, potentially at times slightly toxic election year as both parties trade insults at each other.
Yes, interesting. And many commentators have said that this is a reminder that at the end of every culture war, there are real people as well. But let's move to one of those flip-flop accusations, shall we, which is in the Daily Telegraph, Starmer abandons this £28 billion Green Pledge, which has been on, off, and leaves us all confused then, Annabelle.
Well, it does, particularly over the last week, because we've had various shadow cabinet members coming out and insisting that either Labour will press ahead with this £28 billion green prosperity plan, and later others suggesting that it might be watered down in some way, that the sums reduced, even if the intention is still there. What's interesting on the cover of the Telegraph, of course, is that the story comes alongside a warning about the UK's debt crisis, and arguably one of the reasons why Keir Starmer feels as though he needs to backtrack on his £28 billion a year by 2030 pledge is because Labour simply don't know the extent to which the public finances are in a very parlous state. And so I imagine that in response to yet another U-turn, 30 U-turns, as the Prime Minister told us earlier today, that Keir Starmer will insist, the Labour Party will insist that it's the Tories leaving them with no money left, as Liam Byrne famously said in 2010, whereas perhaps the Tories will use this, as they have done with net zero policies in the past, to put clear blue water between themselves and Labour and try and tighten the screws on them in that way.
So what was the error? Putting a figure on it, as in 28 billion, and what is now, are we going to hear, is left of this policy?
So, I mean, I think there is some context to this. So Labour could have made the argument that they put the £28 billion figure on this back in 2021, before the mini-budget, before everything that everyone can remember happened to the economy. It just sort of didn't happen completely in abstract. But I think there has been a sort of calculation made that it is less damaging for the party to have to sort of suffer accusations of flip-flopping than the opposite, which is effectively to go into the election and say Labour sort of can't be trusted with the economy, they're sort of frittering away spending. And I think this shows now that Labour is even more determined to win the campaign. There was a sort of battle going on between people who were focused on what should happen after they won, if they did, and those who were looking more at the campaign. Those who were more on the campaign side, like Jonathan Ashworth and Patrick McFadden, were suggesting this was really going to start costing Labour on the doorstep. They were worried it would dent Labour's lead in the opinion polls as well. Then you had people who were looking more ahead to what Labour might do in government, people like Sue Gray, and suggesting that if you really want to make big changes, if you're sitting down in access talks with civil servants within the next few weeks, this is exactly the sort of thing you need to hammer out. And I suspect it's happening now, partly because the deadline for submitting final policies is, I think, in 24 hours' time for the Labour Party. So they needed to clear this up once and for all.
For their manifesto, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Just got a couple more stories, if we can get them in. One of which is the Financial Times, Netanyahu rejecting the proposals on the table for a ceasefire, calling Hamas's recent demands delusional, Annabelle.
Yes, that's right. So Hamas have come with an offer, the terms of which they cannot surely have imagined Israel would agree to, including a 4.5-month ceasefire, Hamas's continued governance in the region, the release of 1,500 Palestinian prisoners, and other players now feeling as though they're going to try and step in, like Qatar, to renegotiate the terms, which Netanyahu has quite understandably said simply not something that Israel is able to agree to. Of course, if Hamas stay, then they will take the opportunity to rebuild, to regroup, to recover from the last few months of conflict, and potentially prepare for another massacre like that we saw on October the 7th. Of course, the backdrop to this, the context to this, is we have Joe Biden, whose resolve seems to be softening. We had David Cameron last week talking about a possible ceasefire, two-state solution. Certainly to Hamas, it would look as though Western resolve is slightly faltering, and perhaps this is them trying to engage in a sort of propaganda move, tighten the screws, not least on Joe Biden in an election year when he will not want any more US troops in the region than need to be.
Yes, and a very strong warning from the UN Secretary-General about not going towards Rafah, which seems to be next in Israel's sides in their total victory, as he declared again today. Possibly our favourite front page of the night, The Sun. Top son, you know, there he is. Wills thanks well wishes for supporting his Pa and Kate as he joins Tom Cruise at a charity do. In fact, some really nice comments actually from William. I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you also for the kind messages of support for Catherine and for my father, especially in recent days. It means a great deal to us all. It's fair to say that the past few weeks have had a rather medical focus, so I thought I'd come to an air ambulance function to get away from it all. So there we are, making a bit of a light-hearted joke for what presumably been a very difficult few weeks for them. Just some flash photography coming up as we take a look at those pictures of the Prince with Tom Cruise himself.
Absolutely, and I mean, top son, the son really giving Wills the sort of golden boy treatment, and then you can sort of see shoved up in the top right-hand corner, Prince back to work as Harry jets off. So the sort of contrast that they're trying to make between what Wills is doing and what Harry's done, very, very clear. Obviously, some very dapper pictures of Prince William there. Rekindling his love of, at some point, being a sort of air ambulance pilot as well, so probably challenging Tom Cruise at some point. But, you know, he's clearly trying to show his face, be out and about. I think earlier he was at another event at Windsor Castle.
Investiture, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So then he sort of nipped over to this gala as well to raise money for a London air ambulance charity. So
that's quite a coup, isn't it, for a charity event? Let's be honest about
Well, absolutely, yes, they'd be thrilled.
Yeah. The Daily Mail also has the thank you so much for all of your kindness lines in it as well. William's message to the nation, as the Mail points out, his brother jets back to LA after 26 hours and some 30 minutes of FaceTime with his father, Annabelle.
Yes, an extraordinarily fleeting visit from Prince Harry, and I expect many people hoped that the King's shock diagnosis might bring the family closer together. Obviously, the King and Prince Harry haven't seen each other since the Queen's funeral, Queen Elizabeth II's funeral, back in autumn 2022. It's a long time for them to have spent apart, and yet when Harry came over, such a short 30-minute visit with his father, perhaps simply because King Charles wasn't up to seeing any visitors for any longer than that. But amazing, I think, grace and courage from Prince William, his first day after the diagnosis of his father, and of course Catherine, his wife, at home recovering from a 2-week spell in hospital after major abdominal surgery. So the royal family have been through a lot.
Yes, and in fact the Metro, as we just conclude this, incredibly broken. Prince is still apart as royals rally for Charles, with the Princess Anne, you know, continuing to work, making underwater explosives expert, we're told today, so she's working hard. To the eye, though, now, an extraordinary story. Viagra has been linked to a reduced risk of Alzheimer's, and the figures, 18% here in a study of 300,000 men, are high, aren't they, Aubrey?
Certainly is, and the Eye tells us that this finding sort of fuels hopes that the drugs which are obviously used to treat erectile dysfunction could be a very cheap way of trying to to battle the sort of risk of people getting dementia. We know it obviously has huge, long-lasting emotional and costly consequences for people as well. Scientists are, however, warning men against starting to take them as a precautionary measure. So, you know, as always, the newspaper's getting very excited about a study, but the sort of experts saying, you know, calm down, this is a sort of first result. Probably people shouldn't rush to the shop to try and get these prescribed.
Yes, you need to
or buy them.
extract what Viagra does so well and use it differently, I guess, don't you,
Yes.
really, for that one? But, yeah, an extraordinary study, as you say. And the comment here from Alzheimer's Research UK, well, this is encouraging. It doesn't yet confirm whether these drugs can slow or stop the disease, which is always the problem with these studies, isn't it? Right, we'll see you next time. Thank you very much indeed.